Welcome to the Business Seller Center Expert Interview Series. Today we're talking with Jeff Swiggett about how buyers value your business. And this is one of the 4 conversations with Jeff about preparing to exit and maximizing your business value when it's time to sell. I'm Kevin Murray, and I'm your host today. Jeff Swiggett is an award-winning business sales expert and certified intermediary, experienced in negotiation, business valuations, deal structures, deal terms, and exit strategies. He's the owner of VR Business Sales in New Haven, a business brokerage providing exceptional merger and acquisition advisory services to companies in Connecticut, Southern New England, and Metro New York. Jeff is one of the few business brokers in New England that has secured the prestigious designations of Certified Business Intermediary from the International Business Brokers Association and a Mergers and Acquisition Master Intermediary from the M&A Source. He's also a member of the Board of Directors for the M&A Source and is the organization's chairperson for 2022. VR Business Sales was named by the M&A Source as the top 2 to 5 person M&A advisory firm for 2020, and it received the M&A Source Platinum Award for conducting over $15 million of transactions in 2021. As part of Jeff's work in helping sellers understand the value of their business, Jeff created a risk adjustment factor matrix that evaluates each business on its management dependency, financial controls, the end markets that they serve, customer concentration, the supplier base, and the competition. Not only does this help uncover deeper strengths or weaknesses that buyers will find, this tool can also be a guide for business owners in their exit preparation to increase the business value before you go to market. We're including a free download with this matrix on this page. All right, well, we're back for our 3rd interview in this series with Jeff Swiggett, and we're talking about his risk adjustment factors. And this is a tool that Jeff has developed to, I think, help buyers and sellers. So these are the things that the buyers are going to want to know about. And this is part of the kind of the lens that buyers are looking at the business through these different lenses to either add value or take away value from an offer they might be considering making. But I think this is also a tremendous tool for sellers to understand in advance how buyers are going to look at them when it comes time to exit and to sell your company, and that there's things you can do in advance to improve your posture in each of these areas. And so we've been digging in to these. Actually, I'll do a real quick screen share here, and we'll just throw up the overall view. So these are the components. So there's management issues, financial issues, end markets that you're selling into, the customers that a business is serving. And today we're going to wrap up by talking about suppliers and competition. So we'll be sure to include links for you so you can get access to the other interviews where Jeff talks about these. But so let me welcome Jeff Swiggett. Good day,
Hi,
Jeff.
Kevin. Good to be back. Good.
Good to have you back. So yeah, why don't maybe you can give us kind of a global statement about the risk adjustment factors. What had you create them, and how have they worked for you and you're working with buyers and sellers over the last decade and a half?
Yeah, so I think one of the things when we do an opinion of value on a particular business, there are a lot of metrics you can measure a business against to come up with that value. Things like multiples of owner cash flow, or multiples of adjusted EBITDA, a percentage of revenues, or whatever it may be. There's a lot of information available to folks like us to kind of figure out if a company's generating these kinds of revenues and these kinds of earnings, and in theory they should, they're going to sell sort of within a range of price.
Okay.
And so I think a little bit it's trying to figure out where in that range your company may fall is what you try to think about. How what the sort of the outside and inside factors that affect your business, that make it more attractive or less attractive to a buyer. Obviously, if it's more attractive, you're going to get you sell in the higher range of a given opinion of value. If you're less attractive, you'll sell at a lower end of the range.
Sure.
So
Sure.
that's what we're trying to kind of add in here. So when we take a look at those six factors, that deal with the markets they're selling into, or the way they're organized, or some of the systems they have in place, it's all sort of based on kind of what we see from buyers who are buying businesses and what they begin to focus in on in terms of how valuable they think a business is.
Right, great. Yeah, it's again, they're not as measurable, but I think what you're attempting to do is bring a little bit of it's kind of like a little bit of art and a little bit of science, where if you're doing a market-based valuation, it's pretty much math. And there's room in there for you to tweak a number and a value up and down.
Right. Right.
Like I'll talk with a seller. Like one of my questions I always ask sellers is like, so how much time do you take off in a year? Because that's a really good indicator of their strength of their management and their systems. And if they be away for 10 weeks a year, that same business with the same earnings and revenue is worth a lot more than a company where the owner hasn't had a holiday in 10 years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. No, you're right.
Great. Well, again, we've covered the first 4 of these in the last couple interviews. So today we're going to talk about supplier issues, and we're going to talk about competitors and how this works in your model. So for suppliers, and actually I'll pull the screen share up again, because that's got your model. So for suppliers, we've got a continuum from a single supplier, which isn't so great. So they have, a company that has moderate supplier base to a business that has a lot of suppliers. So, supplier diversity is always an issue, and especially in this last bunch of years where there's been supply chain issues. So what can you just add a little bit of color and commentary on what
so, I mean, that's that particular, supplier issues is something that often sellers and owners don't focus on. In other words, they may intuitively know it, but they assume that the buyer may not focus on that, because I think they may well assume, the owner might well assume that they're going to focus on who their end users are and their customers are.
Yeah.
But you got to think about a supplier base, because that'll put you as much at risk. A limited supplier base will put you as much at risk as a business that has a large customer concentration issue, in many respects. So you have to think about that. And for some businesses that are, for their process or whatever they do, are heavily dependent on one type of supplier, or one supplier in particular, or, just a couple of suppliers, then they're at more risk. And so they, it's sort of one who is operating with a good business that has a multiplicity of suppliers and a wide range and right availability and geographically everything else, then they're much less at risk. And so it's a much better situation for the owner, and consequently for the buyer as well. So that's what we think about a lot. I mean, it could be anything from manufacturing firms to distributors, dealers who are, it's better to be a dealer who's not so dependent upon, 2 or 3 principal suppliers, and they have a variety of people they can buy from and sell to, to end.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of a trade-off, because on one level, if you're the exclusive dealer for, let's say Yamaha Motors, in your territory, that gives you a little bit of a plus. But if that's the only company you're buying from, there's a little bit offsetting negative there.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I mean, and a lot of it, when you look at supplier risk, it's, probably if you have one supplier and they happen to be Honda Motor, you're probably a little less. I mean, the issue that they're going to go out of business is probably less of a concern than a small guy who's making a particular part for you or something, or has some product that you're selling that puts you at greater risk, should something happen to them.
Yeah.
or they
Your
get
supplier.
purchased or
Yeah.
bought, or yeah,
Yeah. Your
who
supplier
you know.
was Swiggett Motors.
Right, exactly. I'd be suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, great. So,
yeah.
I mean, this has always been an issue and an appropriate one for a long time, but I'm just curious if you've seen a shift in the last few years, because there's been huge supply chain issues and disruptions and price increases. So how has this, what have you seen in the last 2 years or so around this issue in deals that
Yeah,
you're?
I mean, yeah, with the pandemic, I mean, the supply chain issues became really big in terms of availability of product and availability of supplies. I think if you didn't have if you had some supplier risk because of a limited supplier base, I think,
Yeah,
created more problems for you.
yeah, yeah,
Because it was hard enough even with people with multiple suppliers to get the kind of support they needed in terms of the materials they needed and in the time they needed through the pandemic.
yeah,
So it didn't help the situation. And I think a little bit it sort of brought into focus the reason we put a supplier adjusted risk to businesses, for those times when the world ends up in a pandemic. Who would have thunk that 2 years ago that
yeah,
would be
yeah,
worrying about a pandemic? So,
yeah. I,
but
I
that's why
think back
people
to,
worry about this stuff.
oh yeah, I think, it's always smart for people to be doing some kind of level of forecasting, and the
Right.
SBA lenders are going to be looking at it. And I think to your point, our forecasting skills have been seriously challenged in the last
Yeah.
years.
Right.
Like there's just all the assumptions that we used to make as like baseline rock solid. Yeah, they're out the
Right.
window.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So
For
just, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah. No. No. Go ahead.
Just
No.
another kind of question about supply issues before we move along. Do you have any kind of stories, any tales from, the real world where supply issues really became an issue that was critical to getting a deal done, or it got in the way of getting a deal done? Because it's important, but has it ever risen to like one of the most important things in a deal that you were working on?
Um, yeah, that's a good question, Kevin. I think that, um, I've had more issues with supplier risk over the last couple of years because of pandemic with some of these deals, but that's probably true of a lot of companies. I think that was just the nature of the beast. But I'd say that I haven't, to be honest with you, I don't think I have, 15 years of doing, I've never seen a deal I saw one deal get squirreled because of this, or it created it created some issues in terms of the way the deal could be structured.
Okay.
And um, this is a deal we did probably 10 or 12 years ago. And, they were doing a service, basically buying and selling sort of an electronic component a used electronic component from one supplier,
Yeah.
that was giving them, basically selling them, at 5 cents on the dollar, some used components they had that they could refurbish and put
Okay.
back out of the market and sell them for a very significant markup on them.
Yeah.
Problem is they had just one company doing that for them,
Yeah.
so they had a lot of customers, but one supplier. And
Yeah.
so, what it knocked the total value of the deal down. Plus, we had to structure the terms of the deal. They got paid out sort of over time in terms
Yep.
of over a period, I think, of 3 or 4 years,
Yep.
in terms of the full value of the purchase price, because the buyer of the business wanted to be sure that the supplier was going to stick around for a while.
Oh yeah. Well,
And that's the reverse of often what happens. You have a business with a large customer concentration. Really, you structure those deals the same way. You don't get all your money up front. You're
yeah.
gonna have to earn that thing out, because then the earn out will be sort of contingent on whether that those customers stay with you. Much like if a supplier is going to stay with you in that
Yeah.
case.
So it's the way to kind of monetize the risk, so to speak. It's like, yeah, I'm going to still be interested in buying your company, but
there is a lot of risk here, and the way that I'll
Right.
ameliorate my risk is by
Right.
spreading things out over years. Like it's more of like a performance-based model. Like I'm not just
Right.
going to believe you, or I do believe you, and there's risk.
Right.
Right. And it occurs to me, Jeff, that in let's say the early conversations with a seller, when you're preparing them to go to market, you're putting together your data on the company, you're writing up the story about the business, that would probably be a good time to let the client know, you got a serious supply risk issue or a customer concentration risk issue. You're going to take a haircut probably, or it's not so much about the price, but the terms, to your point.
Yeah. Yes, it's always a good time to kind of go over this kind of thing in terms of sort of addressing each of those 6 risk characteristics, and the supplier base is one of them. So it's one I think people tend not to think about and sort of lose track of a little bit, but it's important. It's an important one,
Just another.
And personally, I think it knocks down both the value of the business and the way it's going to get paid for in the transaction. So you kind of get a double hit on some of these things,
Yeah. Well, it's risky, and you handle your risk by paying less and paying it over time. That's
that's exactly it.
So one of the other things that I'm just aware of in some, in the due diligence versus closing and post closing, is that there's some tension between the buyers and sellers around, well, I want to talk to their supplier, the buyers, like I want to meet with the suppliers. And that's a big issue in terms of like some sellers don't want to do that. You don't want to do it early. You don't want to do it ever. It's like once we sell the company, I'll stick around. I'll introduce you to people. But that's been an issue with, again, the sellers not necessarily wanting to tip their hand to their suppliers until they got a deal in the bank.
Yes. I mean, I think that is it's always a tough thing to work with a seller on, either to let buyers, interview their clients or for that matter, interview their suppliers prior to. I think there are ways of handling it. I think they also those fears tend to be overblown, in terms of thinking that their clients they're going to, run from them or their suppliers will run from them. I think that's often not, that is, in my experience, when we've had those conversations with suppliers or customers, either of them has said, you know what, I'm really glad you brought me on board with this. I mean, I'm glad to know you're selling the business. I mean, we still fully intend to stay with the new owners, and
so long as they want the sales. Yeah, the suppliers
they don't
want
to. Yeah, they don't want to change their vendors, and they don't want to change their customers. So I think it's tough to convince an owner that's okay to have those conversations, but it's an important thing, and I think it tends to be less traumatic for the business than they think it's going to be.
Yes, I think some sellers, or some buyers rather, they think, like with some of my clients that have been running a business for 20, 30 years, they're like, oh, it's just your seller has these great relationships and he's getting great deals, and that's not, it's like, he's got good relationships or she's got good relationships because they've been working together for decades, but they still have terms and they still have a price point, and they're not necessarily getting favorable treatment. All the buyers think, oh, they're getting some great deals because they're golf buddies or whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's it's funny. I have you can speak to private equity groups are in the business of running transactions and buying and selling companies. And so when they have a portfolio of business that they're trying to eventually exit, they have to run through the same process we typically have to run through with a seller. And, their belief is, for a lot of them, is that they're quite open about the sale. And they're quite open with the employees of the platform that they're selling, because they don't want to create a process where they're trying to hide everything, from either their clients or their employees. And they just want to be open about it. And it makes the process that much simpler, that much more effective, and consequently more valuable, basically. So,
no rumors.
And typically they do it because their experiences, and they make a living out of this, is, you know, people, whether it's clients or suppliers or employees, they stick around through a transition, and leave if the new owners give them a reason to leave, but they don't give them a reason to leave, then they'll stay. I think that those
Yeah.
fears tend to be overblown all the way around. So,
Okay. All right, great.
but
So any other kind of closing thought? And again, maybe one of the questions is are there ways that sellers can change their supply issues if it is a risk issue and they don't score well on that particular category? I guess there's things sellers could do to, look for alternate supply, try to expand that. I don't know if that's been a conversation you've had with folks.
yeah, I think that to the extent that they can do that, it's a little bit like if you go talk to a company that has a large customer concentration and the guy wants to sell in 2 years. I mean, sometimes it's not going to happen in terms of trying to reorient their client base that quickly. So I think it's as long as you understand what that means, and if you've got time, let's say 5 to 10 years to spread that risk either on the customer side or on the supplier side.
Yeah.
So that you can develop it, then you become a more valuable business.
Yeah.
But it's those issues are often long term in terms of the solutions.
Yeah, I think of it in terms of like you need a lot of runway for that. We're not
Yeah,
gonna
that's
change
exactly.
this in 6 months or 3
Yes.
months or
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that's more the venue of like exit planning versus business
Yeah.
brokerage. If you've got
Right.
3 to 5 years and you're not ready to go to market, but
Right.
that's not mostly who we're talking with.
Right.
Well, let's shift to the sixth and the final item here is about competitors. And so we'll just bring the model back up one more time. And what Jeff is talking about here at the bottom is, if you've got a lot of competitors, that's going to give you a ding. If there's limited amount of competition, it's kind of neutral. And if you're the market leader, you've got a proprietary product, there's whether it's patent protection or some kind of market protection, that's obviously going to give you an upside in your valuation. So let's, just kind of talk about that, and just, fill in a little bit more about.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, this is when you start speaking to a buyer. I mean, they may not even all think about all 6 of those sort of areas that we discuss here in terms of the risk factors.
Right.
But I guarantee you, every one of them thinks about what the competition is doing and for the business. So that's one risk factor they really focus in on. And so I think that's, for obvious reasons, if you got a lot of competitors supplying the same product, and you're fighting tooth and nail every day to kind of generate the revenues, and I mean, that's going to be less attractive than somebody who's got a solid brand name, maybe a proprietary product. They're the only one out there selling the stuff. They've had steady clients buying what they have to deliver. That's a really attractive, business to someone that, I mean, from my perspective, those businesses generally operate at pretty high margins, and, they don't have to do a whole lot to generate good revenue. So, and buyers are looking at the same way. They're all, I mean, it's like anything else, whether supplier risk or customer concentration risk, they're looking to reduce the risk, right? So it's pretty intuitive that if you don't have a lot of competition there, the risk of that business goes down, and it's less risky. And so that gives you it makes it a more valuable business, really.
All right, great. Yeah, because I think the buyers are always going to want to know about the business's competitive positioning, and they're going to do their own dive into that. So I kind of think that, especially with the internet and so much information out there, it's really wise for the seller and for us on the broker side to share the information, to show like, we know where we're at, because a lot of times the seller is going to say, oh no, I don't have any, we're the best, right. It's like,
and Yeah. And, there may be some. I mean, I think if you operate in a business that has a lot of competition, then something's got to. If you really want to separate yourself, you got to differentiate in some way, and maybe it's you
Yeah.
just got better people, or you got better processes, or you're just more effective at executing on what you have. I mean, I think that's some way if you want to make yourself more valuable in a market where you got a lot of people you're competing against, you have to differentiate yourself and
Yeah.
make and convince the buyer of the business that you're sufficiently differentiated that people come to you regardless of the fact that you have a lot of competition.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I
So
think that the kind of things like having a really robust referral network of other
yeah,
businesses that are sending you business, that brings a lot of value to a seller. Really
right,
good testimonials and really good reviews. Like those are things that are valuable.
right,
They're hard to duplicate. But yeah, it's like, and it's always the difference between what the sellers think their competitive positioning is versus what it really is.
right,
There might be
right,
some differences there. Um,
right.
but I think it's smart for us to put together uh, a pretty accurate impression, as good as we can say, to say, yeah, there's some bigger competitors, there's some smaller competitors, but these people, they operate in this range, and in that range,
Right.
they have some things that they do more effectively or deliver better experience for the client.
Right.
Okay. So again, this same question from the last section on supplies, Jeff. Any particular tales from your history about where like competition and the issues around competitive risk maybe showed up, after into due diligence that weren't so disclosed that really got in the way of a deal? Again, whether it was
Yeah, I don't, it's the kind of thing where, I mean, competitive issues are pretty intuitive for a lot of folks. I think it's not, I think it's not usually, unless it's a sort of a unique type of business. I mean, the the competitive characteristics of the business are pretty apparent to any
yeah,
buyers and frankly to me when I'm beginning to represent some seller. So there's nothing. I mean, we've sold businesses that operate in very competitive markets. I would say the ones that are more successful than others is that they've got some way to differentiate themselves, or they're just better, or whatever it may be. They've got a great reputation, and so yeah, I don't really have any horror stories where something blew up, like because we didn't understand the competitive environment. I
yeah,
mean, frankly, from my perspective, I much prefer to be able to sell, you know, a business or anything for that matter that doesn't have a lot of competition.
oh
It's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
but if I gotta start explaining why I'm better than the next guy, then
yeah,
I'm like 50% behind the eight ball already.
yeah.
So whether I'm selling a fuller brush or a business for that matter,
Well, it's interesting,
you go in and say, hey, we got this unique product sold all over the U.S. or North America, and we got maybe one competitor out of here, and
yeah,
we've got some patents and intellectual property rights on it.
yeah,
It's a pretty attractive thing. It's an easier thing to sell,
yeah.
and it's an easier thing to convince buyers that you have a more secure business model, less risky business model.
Yeah, and that earns you a premium as a seller.
Yeah,
If on any of these six risk adjustment factors, if you can validate and demonstrate why you're doing really well according to those, each one of those could earn a premium versus
right,
straight up metric based, market based approach to value.
right.
Yeah, so I fortunately learned it early on in my business career. Like if you compete on price, there's
Yeah,
always going to be somebody else that's hungrier and will go a little bit lower and want your
yeah,
market share. So like deliver something really good.
right,
Really
right,
be the best at what you can do, whatever it
right,
is. So
right,
I'm fortunate. I think all my clients are really good people, good businesses. They know what they're
right.
doing, and they do deliver some extra value. And that's part of my challenge as a broker, is to convey that, to communicate that to the market, to buyers,
Exactly. Yeah,
command that premium.
yeah, exactly.
Great. So just
Yeah.
another question I thought about before we started was just, what do you think about competitors as buyers? Is that a valid pool? So we're off of the risk.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to, the sale to a competitor is you have to think strategically about how you're going to go about doing that. And unlike the conversation I had a little while ago with you saying, hey, be open with the market and all that kind of stuff, be open with your suppliers and customers and clients out there. I think if you are looking to sell to, and an obvious buyer are the competitors out there for it, then you have to handle that marketing a little bit differently, and how you take a business to markets is a little bit different. But there's going to be a market among that group. So I think it's if it's a part of your strategy to sell, and for some transactions, it may be the only market for your particular business. So you want to think about that a little bit, but it is a viable market.
All right, great. Well, we've kind of come to the end of not only today's call, but this entire series. So we've got 3 videos in the can, so to speak, and we'll be able to share those with people. Maybe we'll put it together as a series, or some way that people will have access to this kind of archive that we've created, trying to do some download from Jeff's brain.
Yeah, all right.
Jeff's experience. So I hope this was enjoyable for you. I think that
absolutely,
there's so much knowledge that's just between your ears that you're not even aware of, Jeff. So it comes out when you start talking.
Yeah, it's amazing how 15 years go by and something sticks up in there.
Yeah, how about that? Well, really, really great.
And I enjoy it, Kevin. I enjoyed speaking about it, and it's always one of those things. I do know something about this business. So it's when I find myself speaking to you about this thing. So it's good.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thank you again. And for people that want to get some more information about this process and the valuations and the marketing, feel free to reach out. We're happy to have those conversations with you. So thanks.
Absolutely. Again, all right. Thanks, Kevin.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
If you're thinking of selling your business now or someday, reach out to Jeff or me to begin this important conversation. Thank you.